What do you know about foster care? It's often given a bad rap, but people forget that no one ends up in foster care without a reason. And sometimes the alternative is much worse. In A Week One Summer, ex-rugby player turned head teacher Floyd Steadman explores his journey from a chaotic childhood to foster care to finding rugby, playing for Saracens and the Barbarians, and ultimately becoming a head teacher. He shows a lot of self-awareness, integrity, and gratitude, all things that have the underlying belief that tomorrow can be better than today. Let's get into it. From a young age, Steadman shows an incredible amount of self-awareness. Even his decision to run away from home was strategic. He says the decision to run away from home was not hot-headed and emotional, it was calmly planned. His household wasn't safe, and his dad would eventually say that he didn't want anything to do with young Floyd. By then, his mum would have been chased away by his dad, and so by the time he ended up in foster care, he had a lot of self-awareness out of necessity because there was no one else left to understand him. Despite this, though, the self-awareness turned out to be a blessing. On page 20, he says, I want to be a teacher. And so he knew he had this dream of being a teacher whilst he was still in school himself. On page 31, he says, I was determined to become a teacher. And then on page 110, he said, every question became simple. If it helped me become a teacher, the answer was yes. If it didn't help me become a teacher, the answer was no. So teaching was a really important part of his life from a young age. And so was rugby. On page 27, he says that he found himself on the rugby field. So teaching and rugby were core parts of his psyche from his teens. He had strong values in general as well. And these values would eventually create his philosophy that he would use as a head teacher. So on page 130, he discusses that philosophy. It includes strong leadership, educating the whole student, and punishing the act, not the pupil. So it's noble having these values, but acting on them is another thing entirely. Luckily, though, Steadman didn't just talk the talk, he also walked the walk. Floyd Steadman was a man of integrity. His actions tended to match his words. So when he first ran away, he could have stolen milk to sustain himself, but he didn't. He says, nothing would be quite so easy and quite so wrong. I was not going to steal. Instead, he asked the milkman for a job, and the milkman said yes. So just like that, young Floyd was able to survive without compromising his dignity. On page 7, he discusses how these values contributed to the way he treated other people. He says he tends to wrap his own sons in cotton wool and he makes them feel loved and supported. And as a teacher, he made sure to confront and eradicate any bullying. So perhaps having faced adversity himself, he really didn't want to see other people suffer. He reflects on his teenage years as well, on how somehow he avoided going down the wrong path. He says, I might so easily have drifted in the wrong direction, succumbed to the easy temptations of crime, anger, and blaming everyone else. So somehow he didn't. And part of that could have been innate, but I reckon part of that was also having his foster parents and the rugby schedule that provided stability, structure, and a rhythm. And he expresses gratitude for that, which is what we're going to go into next. Steadman shows gratitude and humility throughout the book, and he remembers the kindness that was shown to him on his journey. So when he first ran away, the neighbour left a blanket out for him, and he says, such acts of kindness are not forgotten. And when he describes his foster parents, he says they're two of the most kind and most decent people you could ever wish to meet. And it's in this household that he discovers rugby, and that would change the course of his life, ultimately setting him off on a journey that would lead to great memories and a powerful community. On page 14, he says, the chaos and cruelty of life at home was replaced by calm and kindness. So he never took kindness for granted. And eventually, he would show kindness to other people. So on page 120, one of the girls in his community runs away from home, and he helps track her down, talks to her, and returns her home to the safety of her parents. And he says, the outcome for this young person was much better than it had been for another runaway 15 years earlier. And that's a full circle moment. And a true example of gratitude is giving back, which is what he ultimately does. In conclusion, Floyd Steadman's biography is a reminder that your current situation isn't your final destination. Despite a chaotic start, he ended up thriving in rugby and becoming an upstanding member of the rugby and educational community. He shows that self-awareness, integrity, and gratitude can all allow you to succeed without losing yourself. They say every cloud has a silver lining, and in Steadman's case, that silver lining just happened to be egg-shaped. If you like this book about a rugby player that had faced real adversity, you might also like Rise by Springbok sensation Siya Kolisi.